What's up, everybody? This is your boy Share Speaks. For those that are just tuning into my channel for the first time, make sure you guys hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and also feel free to subscribe to my boys Millaboy Gaming and Heemz Gaming for more gaming and live stream. They do some pretty dope stuff. You may see your boy up in there kicking some ass. Okay, in today's video, I got a treat for you guys, courtesy of Variety and Brian Crescente. He recently did an article about how they ended Clementine's story. If you guys don't know who I'm talking about in terms of Clementine, I'm talking about the little girl that grew on us for the past 7 years in the Telltale's Walking Dead video game series. And in this article, he's going to be talking about how they were able to submit Clementine's legacy and finally end her story in that game. Now, if you guys don't know as well, Telltale Games sunk underwater, and Skybound Games, pretty much scooped them up and they were able to finish the last 3 episodes. In the midst of when Telltale Games went under, they were already halfway done with episode 3, Broken Toys. And so here we go. So when it landed last month, The Walking Dead final season was both the conclusion of a critically acclaimed, narratively driven video game series and the finale for a young heroine that players watched grew up across 7 years of games. It also marked the surprising, devastating conclusion to the studio of creators behind the games, and ultimately underlined their willingness to do just about anything to deliver that final moment of Clementine's journey. He goes on to say, Kent Muldell goes on to say, it wraps up both basically Telltale and it wraps up the series, The Walking Dead. The thing that made Telltale famous is pretty much what he said. Now, mind you, he's the creative director of The Walking Dead, the final season. This is what he told Variety in a recent interview. He said, and I quote, I worked on the very first season of The Walking Dead, so basically The Walking Dead was Telltale to me, end quote. He goes on to say, I'll quote again, I worked on a bunch of other titles, but that's the game that everyone knows Telltale for. That's what it is. We were always going to come back to doing it another one, for it felt like forever for the 8 years or so I was there, end quote. Here comes the collapse. Now, like I mentioned before, it went underwater. And Telltale was so sure of its finale for The Walking Dead and the conclusion of the protagonist Clementine's tale that it took the unusual steps of announcing all the release dates for the episodic games, our final arc, well before the games were even done. Now, back in September, Telltale designer Mark Darren and Udall both talked enthusiastically about the game and how it managed to both embrace the character and tone of the Walking Dead comic book while also breaking free of the powerful gravity of its storytelling to forge its own tales and beloved characters. And I'm pretty much gonna skip ahead and go to the part that that everyone's looking for pretty much. Hold on. Okay, so this is pretty much the latter half of the article. Weeks later, after Telltale shut down, Skybound Games, the gaming arm of Robert Kirkman's Skybound Entertainment production company, announced it was taking over production of the last 2 episodes to ensure that the series finale would be published. It was a Hail Mary for a small company of soon-to-be unemployed developers at Telltale and Skybound Games, which wasn't really designed to develop games internally. Now, with that being said as well, keep in mind that Skybound Games is literally a baby and is in its infancy as well. So for them to take on the Telltale guys and the rest of the company, man, it was exactly what they said. It was a Hail Mary. So here we go. Entering Skybound. There was 5 of us. Ian Howe, CEO of Skybound Games, told Variety in a recent interview, and I quote, to have a team of 5 people suddenly have this fall in our lap as a major project that needed completing and with a sizable development team, that was a big, big undertaking for us. We decided that we wanted to be completely transparent with the team, end quote. And so Howie hopped on a flight and flew to San Rafael, California, where Telltale was based, to hold a sort of a town hall meeting with the 50 or so developers who had been working on The Walking Dead the final season. And he goes on to say, we were basically saying, here's what we're trying to do. It was before we'd resolved all the legal issues, end quote. Howie said he walked the group through what it was that Skybound was attempting to do, and that he wanted to be completely transparent. He wanted to be completely transparent about the fact that there was no promise of a job waiting for them after the game wrapped. And at least they were honest about it. He went on to say, and I quote, we went up and said, look, we would like you guys to come back and finish the game. We don't feel anybody else can do it. We don't feel anyone else should do it. We really only want you guys to do it, but we don't know how long this is going to take, and we don't know what the long term looks like, end quote. And I respect that so much, man. These guys took these guys, they finished a great project, and here it is. And plus, not only that, but they were also forthcoming. They were honest, upfront, and direct. That's what you need, man. So their response, Howe said, was life affirming. They said, and I quote, what came back from that was just this intense passion to finish the game, to do almost whatever it took. He said, rather than take advantage of that, we said, okay, we're going to embrace that spirit and we're going to help these guys finish this story with almost whatever it takes from our side. So there was a major financial undertaking, a major structural undertaking, and then a major responsibility to the people. End quote. How and his team of four set to work finding financing for the project and figuring out how quickly they could put people back to work. He goes on to say, and I quote, one of the things we did was negotiating with the original landlord for some space, he said, adding that they made sure the team was okay with working in the building where they once had jobs. Talk about fucking traumatic. And they went on to say, we were conscious that there could have been not something, this could have been not something you want to put people through. It's a traumatic thing to lose a job we didn't want, so necessarily put people back through that, of course. So I literally can't speak highly enough of what these guys did. There was never anyone who complained or asked for something, asked for anything to be honest with you, but just came back and got with it and finished the game. End quote. He went on to say, a number of the people who stayed on to finish the game made personal sacrifices to do so, and that his team tried to help out. And I quote, what we did at the outset is we were super conscious about that team having kind of been left in a situation with no severance. Howie said. So we immediately put some fairly major programs in place that really would have rewarded the team in the event that we could have a successful conclusion to the project. So we treated that as our absolute priority. The people came first. We were very straightforward with people. We would love them. We would tell them exactly what we would do, and then see if that made sense for them. Some people said, "I can't do that. I need long-term security," and that I appreciate and understand. End quote. Exit Telltale. So Muddle had worked at Telltale Games for about 8 years when the end of the studio came. He said he worked primarily in cinematic roles, creating cinematics and cutscenes for years before getting the chance to be creative director for the final season of The Walking Dead. And he said, I quote, I was just running the team there before Telltale exploded, he said. Then when it came back up for Skybound, I was still doing the same thing. End quote. He said the downtime, the 2 months between the closing of Telltale Games and when Skybound swooped in to take over publishing, was the worst part of the experience for him. We basically went right back to the work in the same building, almost in the same place with the same machine setup, he said. We stayed in the same building. We had to move up to a different floor, but we were still in the cavernous ruins of Telltale. We were able to continue our work pretty much exactly as it was. Skybound had done such good work for setting everything up that we were able to sit down on the first day and get to the data on our computers. It was like no time had passed. End quote. Thank God for data. So Telltale's closure came about halfway through the third episode, as I mentioned in the very beginning. So the team, made up entirely of people who worked on the game at Telltale, were tasked with wrapping up the last 2 episodes of the 4th season. He went on to say, and I quote, it was really magical. In some ways it was weird, Muddle said, of working at Skybound. There was kind of an arc of history at Telltale where there had been a lot of overbearing executive oversight kind of throughout the history, and it had sort of lessened with time as everything had gone down. It was even lighter on the final season. Even when Telltale was active, and now with the benefit of Skybound Games, it was like, oh, it's just us. We make the calls on if the game is going to be good. As long as Skybound also thinks it's good, then we're fine. So in a way, it was almost kind of liberating. Quote. So Muddle added that it was an emotional task for the team, creating the conclusion to Walking Dead and essentially the studio. And I quote, even before the studio was closing, it felt like both an honor and a huge task to actually be the people to put an end to Clementine's story, he said. We know so many people care about her. There are so few characters that people are so passionate about. They act like she's their daughter. We just really wanted to make sure that it closed out her story in a way that was satisfying, but also closed out Telltale. Alright, so killing 2 birds with 1 stone. I like it. Makes perfect sense. And I have played, the last episode too, man. It really rocked me. It's kind of a tribute to Telltale in a lot of ways. There's especially stuff in the final episode. Like there's a hallway with credits all over and stuff and things like that and callbacks to earlier seasons. Stuff just to hopefully make it feel like it really is a cohesive end to the whole journey that we all took together. End quote. It definitely was, man. It definitely was. Oh man. And there were quite a number of challenges beyond those that typically come with the game development. Chief among them was the fact that Skybound wasn't offering long-term employment. However, said that they had a number of conversations with people who told them that they wanted to finish their work on the game, but that they received a job offer and they were going to take it. So we basically did whatever we possibly could to accommodate those people, how we said. We even had people working remotely or working at night while doing another job. And we always made sure the new employer was aware of what they were doing. Honestly, every part of this has been actually really life affirming because everybody I think came at it and tried to do the right thing. End quote. Muddle also called Skybound's approach very transparent from the beginning, and I quote: "Everyone knew when their end date contract was, and there were incentives in place to continue to the end. I'm sorry, to continue to that end date." He said. Some people stayed all the way to the end, and some people found other more stable opportunities for longer term and left before the project was over. Unquote. So, what about Skybound development? Well, and I quote, we set out to do what we set out to do was to rescue the game, and that was the number one objective. We were kind of really laser focused on that, Howie said. Now, while Howie said Skybound was completely transparent with the team, tells our team about the future, they didn't, for instance, say they would have a job at Skybound following their work on The Walking Dead. They couldn't tell them what the future held for the group. I mean, which makes sense. I mean, like I said, Skybound Games itself is a fairly new gaming company as well. So the reason we didn't know was because Skybound Games was in its absolute infancy when this all happened. Ding ding ding. So Skybound Games was formed as a Skybound publishing division of Skybound Entertainment, just 5 months before Telltale's implosion. And we're gonna get to the sweet part. Oh Jesus, I'm reading. All right, guys, here we go. So with the game shipped, Skybound Games team is mostly refocusing on its founding principles and goals. So the year includes a pretty packed roster for Skybound, with games like Battle Royale title Not My Car coming to Steam in early April. The group is also publishing a physical edition of Gang Beasts and bringing Skullgirls to Nintendo Switch. They're also working with Beamdog to bring back a slew of classic role-playing games like Icewind Dale, Planescape, Torment, and Neverwinter Nights. That sound like pretty cool games. So what we're doing at the moment is we're trying to provide help and support to independent developers who have got upcoming launches or have already had success in the digital realm. And we're helping with physical distribution, how we said. We've built that capability so we can now distribute to all the major markets in the world ourselves. That's something that most developers are never going to build, would never want to build, and never should build. So we set that up pretty quickly as we wanted to make sure we can help, end quote. And so, next year includes a lot of projects the team has lined up, but hasn't yet announced, how he said. He did say the company plans to lean more heavily toward publishing original titles based on new IP or Skybound IP. So that would be our lifeblood kind of from 2020 and beyond, he said. Now, Telltale Survival. Now that The Walking Dead, the final season has shipped, a small core of the team, about 15 people, is all that remains working at Skybound, focusing on some back-end code and looking into bringing the game to other platforms. Now, what the long term holds, we're actually in the midst of that conversation at the moment about what that might look like, how we said, of the remaining team members, but no decision has been made yet. End quote. And here it goes right here. Howie said they've been discussing with Muddle and the rest of the group whether there's a way for the team to stay on at Skybound or whether they should spin up a new studio that Skybound would possibly publish for. All those things are up for the discussion, but what really is the most important thing is to find a project that we're all really excited about, he said. That probably overrides everything. I think if we can figure that part out, we'll make the rest work somehow. End quote. And here we all go. Here we goes again, bro. Muddle said he and the rest of the group have some hopes and ideas, but nothing that's real. The people I made the final season with are some of the best people I have worked with, Muddle said. If I can continue to find any excuse to work with them ever again in the future, I will absolutely do so. That's what you call dedication. And here's the big question. Now, does that mean that Skybound could back another Telltale-esque game? Maybe even one based on The Walking Dead? Are we going to tell more stories with The Walking Dead? 100%. Yes. Howard said, that's what we do. Every day there's a discussion about that, multiple discussions about that at some level, but at the moment there's nothing concrete that's actually happening. Yes, because if you guys don't remember my last video I put out, there was a big poll on Twitter talking on whether or not they should continue on after Clementine's story is wrapped up. And I definitely agree to that. I definitely think there should be. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section below, man. This has been your boy Sherry Speaks. I love you guys. I just want to say that before I finish the rest of the article. So I'd be equally happy for Ken, for example, to tell me the game he's always wanted to make or the story he's always wanted to tell, as much as telling a story around one of our IPs. It's much more of an organic process. I think that openness leads to more creativity, which I think leads to better content ultimately. End quote. So the end. For you guys that don't know, it wrapped last month, hitting Windows PC, PlayStation 4, Nintendo Switch, and Xbox One. For the most part, it seemed mostly well received by fans and critics alike, though it didn't hit the same high scores as that first season. Howard said he was very happy with how it ended. I think it's incredibly emotional, and it ticked all the boxes for me in many ways because it wasn't a story that needed to have this enormous finale, Howard said. I think they nailed it, end quote. Muddle 2 was happy with the ending, saying, I think it had everything that's come before and was respectful to the incredible long and hard journey that Clementine has been on, he said. I think ending it in the way we did, providing a bit of hope in the sort of bleak and often ruthless world of The Walking Dead, is the right way to close this out. And so, did Clementine's story end in a way that could leave the door open for a sequel? And Muddle said, "Look, I have ideas for what I would do," he said when asked, "but I don't know if that would happen." So let me know what you guys think in the comment section below, man. What you guys think? Did you guys like the ending of The Walking Dead? Let me know. Sound off in the comment section below. This has been your boy Sherry Speaks. Peace and love.